Morning, Alex. All right. So it's time to move on to Chapter 6. Chapter 5 was kind of a departure from coding and building, and we focused more on design principles, but now it's time to get back to the coding and start working on the techniques for making our pages look more modern than the 1990s. So this gets a little more complicated, but it's a lot less complicated than jumping into HTML and CSS with no experience. So this is just building on what you already know. Okay, so the first idea here is something I've hinted at before, and that is the box model. And if you look here in this picture on the right, what we have here is basically the all of the parts of an element that are going to take up space on a web page. Okay, and some of these are invisible, like padding and margin. Sometimes the border is invisible. And then the content in the middle can vary in size depending on if it's text or images. So let's take a quick look here at what these different parts are. Whoops, not that button. Okay. So if you think about this picture here, with all of the parts labeled, you can see that pretty easily in Chrome if you hit F12. And you look down here at the bottom of the Styles tab, you'll see a very similar box down here. And it's showing you, depending on which element you select, right now it's selecting the body by default, it'll tell you how much space that's taking up. So here, it's kind of tiny, but it says 754 times 656, that's how many pixels that it's the body is taking up here. And at least the content. I'm not sure if that's right. Anyway, if we go in, this is kind of a weird web app. Replit is here in the middle, or basically the content of this page. So it's better if we create our own, and we'll take a look at that. Uh-oh. That was weird. All right. So I'll just throw a div on the page with some text in it. Then I'm going to open this in a new window or in a new tab by hitting that little button in the top right here. So we can see our web page. And now I'm going to hit F12 and I'm going to select this div element, and now we can see that it is 260 pixels wide and 18 pixels tall. And if I adjust the space on the page, the number will change because remember the element takes up the space. If it's a block element, it'll take up all the space horizontally in the container it's in. So whether I increase or decrease the size of the page, it will adjust to the size of the container. All right. So again, this is showing that this element it's taking up this much space just from the content of the element. It has no padding, it has no border, it has no margin. I think the body here does have 8 inches of margin. And I think I may have just figured out that issue you were having, Scott, with putting things towards the top of the page. Did you ever solve that in your recipe app? Okay. I think it might be margin from the body. Okay, so if we take away this margin on the body, which looks like it is the default. So let's take a look at how we get rid of that. And the reason I'm doing this is to show you the fact that this, I was looking at this div here, and all it is the content of the element, the text, and it's a block element, but there is white space outside of this element that's pushing it down from the top of the page and to the left. It has nothing to do with this element other than the fact that it's nested inside the body. The body, on the other hand, has a default, or somewhere something is setting it. I'm assuming it's the browser default style sheet is giving the entire page, well, at least the content within the body, a margin of 8 pixels. So let's get rid of that. Anyway, for this example, I'm going to use embedded CSS. I use a lot of embedded CSS in this class because I want to be able to I want you to be able to see the CSS at the same time as we are working on the HTML. But remember, you'll most likely be using external CSS most of the time in the real world. Okay. So we want to make a rule for the body, and we want to set the margin to 0. This is what this chapter is all about. It's all about using HTML and CSS to control the layout of the page. Okay? And so you basically have to have a solid understanding of what all is possible involving what can take up space, because a lot of it is invisible, and a lot of it can be multiple things affecting each other. So setting this margin to 0. Okay, and then if we load it here, we can see here's what it looked like originally, and here's what it looks like after removing that margin from the body. And then it looks like I am flush with the left side, but I feel like the top, the element does not have any extra space above it, it looks like. But the font must be using something. It must be a font affecting this. Anyway, this little bit of space isn't so bad. Okay, the problem is if you give it a background, so if I give a div a background dash color of blue, so here I've made it flush, the background goes all the way across the page. Here where it's not flush, I'll have to turn that off for this example. It looks like this. So those look drastically different, don't they? And it's caused by margin on the body. And we can look at the chart here. Margin is the outermost space that you can affect in an element. And so it's the space between the border and everything else. All right. And we've talked about padding and border in previous chapters, but margin is, I think, one we haven't really talked about that much, and it causes a lot of layout problems if you don't know how to use it. And so let's add another container to this page. Fix this. We'll give this one a red background. Alright, so this is a rule that is going to apply to a div with the class of first. This one will apply to divs with a class of second. So we want two divs. So now we have two here. We'll give this one class of first. We'll give this one the class of second. And that should apply those rules. Okay. And that way we can see what happens when we affect these different things. Okay, so to the first one, I'm going to add margin dash bottom, and we'll give it 3 pixels of bottom margin. So what do you think that's going to do here? Okay, so I've given the first box margin, bottom margin of 3. Okay, so we have some space between them now, and I can control that by raising or lowering that margin. What about if I give this one margin top 3 pixels? Okay, and so here, before we've given it the margin, we can see the top one has bottom margin of 3. Get extra magnifying glass for this one. Okay, bottom margin of 3. If we select over it like this, it tells us here in the center of this box, well, these list of properties here, but the margin is 003. So left and right are 0, top is 0, bottom is 3. Okay, and then this one does not have a margin. Okay, so let's refresh it so that it gets that margin. You'll notice nothing changed on the page, nothing moved on the page, but the top one now has a bottom margin of 3. This one has a top margin of 3, and so what this is doing is, instead of creating 3 plus 3 pixels of space here, this top one is saying, okay, nothing can get closer than 3 margins from, or I'm sorry, nothing can get 3 pixels more than 3, well, you can't get closer than 3 pixels to its bottom. Okay, it does not want anyone to get closer than 3 pixels to its bottom. Okay? Stay away from my bottom, it says. This one says, well, stay away from my top. No one can get closer than 3 pixels from my top. So, this guy's worried about his bottom, this guy's worried about his top, and so they do not go any further than 3, even though this one wants 3 and this one wants 3. It doesn't add together to create 6. It's very important. So the margin will only use, whichever one is the highest if they're affecting each other. So if this guy decides, well, 3 pixels is way too close to my bottom, I want things to be much further from my bottom by double. We can raise that. He's very worried about his bottom. Okay. And then we refresh the page here. All right, now there's 6 pixels of space here below the blue box's bottom. Okay. And we can see that here, margin 006. This one says, okay, nobody can get closer than 3 pixels to my top. I am observing your rule of not having anyone closer than 6 pixels from your bottom, so I'm still going to put 3. I'll use 3 of your 6 to for my margin space. Okay, so it can be tricky when I say, okay, there's this space here, I'm done with it. How do I get rid of that, right? If I go to the first or the bottom element and I say, okay, I want to turn off the top margin. If I come down into styles, and I wonder if it's not going to let me do this because it is in the embedded. Nope, it's up here. Okay. So I'm going to turn this thing. You can also use this to test CSS pretty easily by turning things on and off. So down here, the rule for div second is affecting this red box. We can see it has a margin top of 3, and if I uncheck this, it'll show me what will happen if that doesn't have margin of 3. So I'm going to turn this off, pay attention to the red box, turn it off, no change. Why do you think that is? It has margin top of 3, but it did not change the page. This is going to happen to you if you work with CSS. You're going to have to understand all the possibilities of where the space is coming from. All right, it's either going to be margin, it might be border, it could be, depending on what you're using, it could be a whole other list of things. But for us, at this point, it's probably going to be margin. So, we built this, so we know that this has margin bottom of 6. If we turn that off, we can see what it looks like without it. We didn't have to change any code. This does not save anything, though. It's just a quick way to kind of see what happens if you turn things on and off, because you might have to try to figure out what's going on in the CSS, especially with layouts. It's really, without practice and knowledge of CSS and the basic properties, it can be very time-consuming to try to fix this. Okay, so that warning in place. As far as what we're doing in this class, it shouldn't be that much of an issue. They're pretty straightforward with what they want you to do, but I'm just giving you the heads up in case you are planning to move ahead in the programming degree. I know some of you may be other majors, but I'm telling you now, we will need this information for the web apps we build. Okay. And everyone else, you need the information to pass the class. So, other majors may think this class is a waste of time, because when am I going to use this? Well, you can ask your advisor to get you in touch with some of the graduates in the field, and have them put some feelers out and ask them, hey, do you ever use this stuff in your job? And I'm sure they'll be able to find someone who does. And if you do have this knowledge, you can put that on your resume. So they will maybe hire you because they need someone to do the job, but they also need someone to manage their website or something, make some changes. Anyway, doesn't hurt to know more. Alright, so that's margin. I do expect you to be able to, create this model from memory. It's only 4 parts, so you would draw a square. For content around that, you draw a square or a rectangle, and label that padding. The next one is border, and the next one is margin. Okay. So you just have to remember that order. You can either remember it from outside in or inside out. It's all, the thing I like about this communicating with the computer is these are CSS properties, so they fit in that category, and they all have different names, and those names are the actual names that you're going to be using in the code. So it becomes very simple to remember when you're using it every time or looking at it every time you do something. So in the beginning, just try to think about it to help you move on or figure it out. All right, so just like padding, we can use the shortcut. So here in this first one, we are setting the margin to 0 for all H1s. That means all 4 sides of the margin will be 0. Anyone remember from padding what 2 numbers mean? Because there's 4 sides, but we only put 2 numbers here. This is top and bottom, and left and right. So if you want the top and bottom to be the same and the left and right to be the same, you can use the 2 numbers. And then with the 3, you'll have to figure that out. In the example we used, it did left and, wait, what did it do? It was 0, 0, 3, and I was trying to do bottom, so I think maybe the first one was top, and then left and right here, and then bottom here. So you can trial and error that if you're not sure. And then 4, obviously, will be all four, starting at the top and moving in a clockwise. So top, right, bottom, left. So it's useful to keep these mnemonic devices, like thinking about the four numbers as a clock. Okay. And as always, you can specify, just like I did, margin top, margin bottom, and left and right as a separate property. But keep in mind, that's going to increase the size of the CSS file, which can have a significant enough effect on the load times that you should try to minimize the number of characters and the lines taken. And that reminds me of two things that I want to show you guys since I'm bringing these up. And let's see, what was the other one? Some about layouts. We're going to talk about writing efficient CSS code and having the computer fix that for us. The other thing is what? Darn, what was it? Maybe it'll come to me later. Some external useful tool. Okay, anyway, it's gone in my mind. So let's take a look at, if you are concerned with the size of your CSS file, which you should be in any kind of website where there's going to be a lot of users. I can't remember what it's called, reducer or something. Okay. Minifier, that's what it is. CSS Minifier. So a minifier will take in code and remove any extraneous white space so that it is smaller but a nightmare for humans to read. So generally what people do is they'll write their CSS and not care about the things we're doing by hand, like minimizing the lines and characters involved. And then they run it through a minifier, which takes out everything. So let's see if it can do anything with this. So I wrote this to make it easy for me to read, and that's what I want to look at when I'm editing it. But it's going to take up more space. It's going to, make people have to download more characters. So you can put that in there. Hit minify. And you can see now this CSS here can be reduced to this, which is all on one line, all extraneous spaces, line returns. I was curious if it would adjust. Let's say I did margin as 0006 instead of margin bottom. Let's see if it's a smart minifier. It is not. It looks like it's only reducing the spaces, and we know, I don't know how many characters this saves. It might not save any, right? Because I have to add the word bottom, and then I'm only getting rid of these here. So anyway, but margin top, no, this was saving a lot of space on this one by using this. No, using this. If the touchpad will work with me here. To touch it in different corners. There it goes. It was the top right that time. Drives me nuts. Okay. So this, whoops. This is wrong. We don't want margin of 6px. We want the bottom to be 6px. So we can do 0006. Takes up a lot less space than margin bottom. Okay. if we copy this, throw it in here, run it. Did not put the bottom. Wait a second. 1, 2, 3. Oh, well, I'm doing the wrong one. That doesn't help. This one should be 0. Oh wait, let's do it this way. Let's get rid of the 0 here and put the 0 there. Okay. Okay, so it's not any different, but it's just a nightmare for us as humans to read. Why would we do this? I think I said it a lot, but let's see. Think about, why would I care to minify code? Why would I even explain this to you? What was the point of this, right? So one last time and then we'll move on. And I probably can't demonstrate this because it's such a small amount of text here. Nope. Pad. Okay, we'll save this to the desktop. We'll pretend this is our external. This could be used as an external style sheet, so let's call it style.css. It's a common name. Okay, and then let's get the minified code, and we'll call that file, save as, style.min.css. Alright, so we've got those two files, style.min.css. Style is 204 bytes. Well, that's 8 times 204 bits. Look at that. That's a pretty good savings of space. 204 to 110. Close to half. That's a pretty good one. So, there were, I'll estimate, no, it couldn't be that much. If we create a new one here, just create a file, and then we'll put 1 character in it, and we'll see how much space that takes up. Hello.css. Oh, no. We'll do 1 character .css. Well, we'll just do a.css because the name might add some space to the file. There it is. This is 1 byte. What if I add 2 characters? Now it is 1 byte still. Another one here. 1 byte still. Add some more. 1 byte. Jeez, come on. Is it not saving it? I might have to refresh the desktop. So I'll select the desktop, hit F5. Yeah. Okay, 36 bytes. It just wasn't refreshed. So I'm editing it in here, but the desktop doesn't care to update the properties until I refresh it. And so 2 characters, 2 bytes. 3 characters. Are you noticing the pattern here? Whoop. Well, 3 characters is probably still, oh no, 3 bytes. So if we follow the same pattern, how many characters did the minifier remove? 204 to 110. It's the number of characters that it removed. Okay, anyway, to make it more readable, we have to add quite a bit of white space, right? So here we put a bunch of tabs. Here is a bunch of tabs. Here we're putting a line return. Every line here, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 line returns. So you can take out those 11 characters, all these tabs. I actually wrote this fairly concisely, but some people like to put a space here. And there's another, whole bunch of characters. Anyway, does this make sense? Does it make sense? Why would having a smaller file size matter? Well, the difference between 110 and 204 bytes is fairly insignificant as a user downloading this file. Uses, a very small fraction of a second depending on your connection. But if you are the one, the web server delivering these files to millions of people or thousands of people, it adds up. So anyway, it's good to make your site load faster and to reduce your load of, because you pay from your web server bandwidth, which is goes away as more people download your pages. All right, I'm also trying to instill in you folks all of this stuff that we're doing. There is a lot of this will directly affects your lives, because shopping online and business that's done online is so ubiquitous. Even each character in your CSS file for a company's website can be boiled down into cost. They wouldn't have invented a minifier if it didn't matter. Okay, and there are minifiers for other languages. So if you're in the logic class, you could get a JavaScript minifier. If you're in Python, I'm sure there's a Python minifier. You guys aren't using any compiled languages, but I don't think it matters in a compiled language. Why don't we compile? Whoops, why don't we minify compiled code? Or wait, compiled languages.
Compiling minifier.
Right, exactly. You can't run the code until you've compiled it, which basically converts the code directly into a lower level computer language, which will only include the bare minimum that you need. So, in this class we'll use CSS, HTML, and I wonder if there's an HTML minifier. That's got to be a thing. Yeah. So, any language that is interpreted instead of compiled, so HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Python, these are all interpreted languages, which means the code is read by the interpreter as it's needed. So in the case of HTML and CSS, the browser is our interpreter. Remember I showed a while ago, when you get a site, when you download a website, it looks like this, but that's not what it's downloading. This is what it's being interpreted as by the browser. If we hit Control-U, we can see this is what is sent from the server, this code. Okay? And the browser converts that into what we see here. So, they're sending this. It has all the white space characters. So there's one there. All the line returns at the end. See this little space here, this little space here, here. It's all being sent. And it's worthless. So, except for being able to interpret it. That being said, do not minify your code before you send it to me to grade. It only needs to be done. Now I'm kind of regretting showing you this early in the class. Just proper principles. And we're talking about layout, so. Okay. We already talked about padding. Here's an example where they're labeling the different parts, but I showed you can just look at this in Chrome and it's much more accurate down to the pixel. Okay, now that's pretty much the box model. It's fairly simple, just a bunch of properties that we've already looked at this point. We've looked at all of them. So you need to file these box model properties together in your mind. That's why I was saying be able to pull this picture up in your mind or draw it from memory. It's extremely important. Okay. Now for something entirely different. We're shifting gears here. We're going to go back to thinking about nesting our elements. So this right here is an example of two divs. They're being resized, and I give it border and a background color. Okay. There is only, both of these are using the exact same code. Okay. It's just the difference is where the code is. So here we have a box above another box, and then over here we have a box inside of a box. And they're the exact same code, just organized differently. So let's see if we can create this. If you are watching this as a recording, you have everything you need to build this. It's just divs, height and width properties, border. I put some margin over here to make the box stick out. Or I think there's, oh, I just remembered what that thing was. Reset sheet. Okay, so we're going to rewind a bit. So, you remember in the beginning here, before we added this rule right here, where it says body margin 0, what happened? What was this for? Let's get rid of it. We'll reload the page. Okay, it is adding this white space here, and by default, because we didn't specify anything, it's going to pull the default. This space here can cause you a lot of problems, and a lot of the elements have just default values for margin and padding and such, so that you can, if someone doesn't provide CSS, it'll load something that's legible instead of all crammed together. So, but it can cause us a bunch of problems. So someone has created, and you can find a bunch of these. CSS Reset. Let's see what that's called. Someone has created, this one is from this website. I guess he didn't want to put his name. Based on this, I'm going to assume it's Eric Meyer. But anyway, this is just a style sheet. And look what it's doing. This is just a comment, so ignore that. This right here is important though. Someone building a style sheet like this, I'm not sure what the rules are about licenses on written code for CSS. I don't think many people are going to be worried about people using it, but here he specifically specified that this is public domain, which means you can use it, you can change it with no ramifications. Okay. So I'm not going to copy that part. Don't tell him though. And what about this? Look at this first CSS rule right here. This is one rule. I mentioned these commas in your selector probably once in the past because everything we've done up until this point, I don't think you've used them that often. But what are these? These are a list of all of the the HTML elements. Body, div, span. We haven't used some of these. H1 through H6. These are all the things that potentially could have margin, padding, and border, and font size differences that we may want to reset, all down to nothing. No properties, all properties are 0. That'll affect the layout, and then it makes it much easier to edit the page instead of using things and discovering, hey, this thing has some built-in margin, it's throwing my whole page off. It takes time to do that. You can just start with something like this. So let's add this in. Okay. And we could put it in our own CSS file, or we can create another one, and I'll call this reset.css. Just copy the code in, and I'm done creating the file. Now to apply this to the page, you guys have been doing this hopefully enough that you understand to connect external CSS. You need to create a link element. Don't quote me on this, but we can check. But I want to put this in the order so that the reset is first. So then my rules will overwrite the reset where necessary. If I did it the other way around, all the rules that I made would be reset by the CSS. Okay. Anyway, we did not change the body margin defaults. It's still 8. But now we have the reset, and it's linked in here. Reset.css. Run that. And now we don't have to worry about that body margin. All right. Let me add a few more things that I think have some built-in margin. Paragraph and H1. Okay, here's what it looks like with the reset CSS and the changes I made. Everything's all crammed together in the same size. This space here I specifically added, so that's fine. Let's take away the reset CSS. So I'm going to select these lines and hit Control / to comment it out. So it's not working anymore. And I'm going to hit run, and we can see over here, there's a bunch of space added. And see that in the full page. Look at all this space. So the H1 has a margin of 21 pixels here. Here the paragraph has a margin of 16. And the divs have a default margin of 0. But, okay. Why is the body? Why does the body have a margin here? Oh, right, because I turned off the reset. I was confused there. Okay, so turning back on the reset, I can select these 3 lines, hit Control / again, that'll remove the comment, run it, and now we're at a baseline where we can affect the CSS without having to worry about the defaults. Does that make sense? So So I recommend, you don't need to do this for the assignments unless you want to, but you need to understand this will make it a lot easier. If you're trying to get the CSS to do something specific, you don't have to worry about a bunch of presets throwing that off. Okay. So that's enough about the box model. Now let's go back to talking about normal flow. And so this is a term that you'll probably never hear again. It's just an idea that people realize, when you're using HTML, it's pretty common sense here, but we're going to be breaking it here in a second. So I think I've talked about this. A web page by default is going to start at the top left. Everything you add is going to go down the page, one column. So here, why is, you'll probably be confused why I'm even asking this, but why is there a div here, and then below that a div, and below that a paragraph, and below that an H1? And I'm going to turn off the reset here for now, because I don't want you to be confused about why yours is different or why everything looks the same. Okay, so let's change it back so we can see each part. Why are these all on a different lines, and why are they in this order? Think about it. If I had no idea, I had this code, I had this website interpretation by the browser, why is it in this order on the web page? Think about it. Or don't think about it if you already know. Okay, so the one that says I am a box, that's the first in the body. So the computer, when interpreting, or the browser when interpreting this file, will start at the top and say, okay, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, in order, top to bottom. And because we didn't set any layout type things, it's just going to keep following that pattern. Okay, put a div, close the div, that's this blue one. Open a div, put this text, close a div, that's the red one. Paragraph, put in the text, close the paragraph. Do you notice the pattern there? This is normal flow. We put it in this order, expecting it to come out in this order. Okay, so with that in mind, what order do we need to put things in to get two divs stacked on top of each other? Well, let's create a new Replit here. This one's demonstrating box model. Let's demonstrate. I'll go ahead and post this also in the chat here before I forget and lose it forever. Okay. Let's look at some normal flow here. So we'll create a new Replit from scratch. We'll start from scratch here. We'll call it Chapter 6 Normal Flow Demo. All right. So let's try to create this first part. A blue box, I'll show you another trick here. I'm going to try to make it as close to this as possible. Let's save the picture to the desktop. Stacked boxes. And I'll put this on the desktop for now because I want to remember to delete it later. Go back into Replit and we will upload that image. Upload file. Let me show you that one more time. Because some of you guys are still trapped in Chapter 4 trying to use Replit. Make sure you watch the videos if you're trapped. Though, if you're not watching the videos, you will never get this message. Okay. Upload a file. Hit these three dots over your files column here. Upload file. Then you can select the picture you want. I put it on the desktop. So I'll click desktop, called it stacked boxes, so I'll select that. It is a, oh crap, it's a TIFF file. That's not gonna work. Well, let's see if it opens. Alright, fine. So TIFF files are generally, yeah, it's not gonna work. Higher resolution. You're trying to capture the best and most detail of an image, you use the TIFF. So a lot of photographs are stored as this because they're not worried about the file size. Well, on the web we are, so we don't want this. Let's see if I can convert this with some program here. If I go to edit, it does open in Paint. I can save as a different file type here. So let's do save as JPEG. That's a pretty common one. And I'll put that on the desktop. Alright, so now it's warning me that I'm losing a lot of stuff by saving this not as a TIFF but as a JPG. Okay, that's fine. I just want to be able to use it on the page, on a web page. So I'm going to delete the TIFF file, and I will add in, or I will upload the JPG version. So here is this. We can change the view to see a version of the picture. So I'm changing it to medium icons. That way I can kind of just see it easier. If I highlight over this one, it says JPG. That's the one I want. Upload. Alright, now I can see it. Okay. And so, what do we need on this page? 2 boxes, so we'll need 2 divs. And now that I'm thinking about it, we can save a lot of time by using, actually I don't need to reopen it because we have it right here. The HTML from this. Let's go Control U so we can view the source. I just want these divs here, and I'll copy this CSS. So we can save a lot of time watching me try to type all that out again. Alright, so we don't need 2 bodies. We need to move the style section into the head section here. Okay. And let's fix this. Let's make Replit fix it. There we go. Okay, so we have some CSS, we have some divs. So let's call this one, to make it easier to see, we'll call this first box. Call this second box. Well, we're not calling it that. That's the text inside, right? Alright. So let's go in and see. We want 2 boxes on top of each other that look like this. We got 2 on top of each other, so that's right. We need to change the background color of the first one to this color. So how am I going to figure that out? Well, I have an extension here. It's called eyedropper. Okay. And you can just Google eyedropper. What are these called? Extensions? Eyedropper extension. If you want to get this for yourself, it's a useful web design tool. And it's just useful for a lot of things, just getting colors from web pages. Oh yeah, eyedropper extension. Okay, and you can click this. This is in Chrome. There's probably something similar if you use Firefox. And then Edge, I haven't used more than 5 minutes personally, so I have no idea what's in there, but I'm sure they have something. Maybe. Okay. And then you go to the link, and then over here it'll say install, then you're done. Pretty easy. Anyway, I want this color. I can go up to my eyedropper. Okay, I'm going to pin it so it's up in my list I want to unpin some of these because they're just taking up space. Okay. So I can click eyedropper and click pick color from web page. And then notice in the bottom right, I could get this red, I could get this blue, I could get the green up here. I could get, and then this is the color I want, so I can click that, and now that color is in the eyedropper. I can grab the name, or I could grab the hexadecimal color number. I'll copy that, and I'll change the background color to there, and lo and behold, we now have that color there. Second one's easy. They just want it white. So there we go. First part done. Now we want to apply some borders. I'm going to guess this is dashed, and I think this one is bevel or something. Let's see. This one we will have to kind of eyeball ourselves, but there aren't as many choices. So let's look up border styles CSS. So we have all of these different ones. It's one of these. It's either groove or ridge, inset or outset. So we're just going to go with groove, save time. All right. So we want a border. I'm going to get rid of this margin too, because that's not part of this right now. It's got a couple of boxes with background colors. Okay, let's go with the border now. Border. What are our properties? Size, so we'll go 3px. First one was dashed. And the color of the border, I believe, was just black. Alright, so now we have that. Alright, next is background color of white. But we want a border that is 3px groove. I forgot the syntax. It's groove, no D. And it is also black, I guess. That is not big enough to see. Let's look at our picture one more time. It says, well, it's not really saying anything. Let's make it bigger and see if that helps. Make sure I don't have any syntax errors here. I'm going to change the size. Let's go 6. Let's try 120. Because I think this is just using a solid border. Yeah, it is. Okay. So why is it doing that? Let's try ridge instead. Or actually, let's just take a look here and see if they're... Yeah, this is what we want. A ridge. Maybe we should just not specify a color. That's probably what it wants. Okay. There we go. So we can go back to 3. It's hard to remember all of this stuff, but it's easy to remember how to figure it out later. Don't be worried about that so much. Just get down the principles. Okay, I have no idea if that's the right one, but it looks different than the first one, so. Thank you for the feedback, Alex. I do that all the time. I'll be in class and I'm like, you guys need to attend class. You can't get through this if you're missing it. And then I realize these are all the people that come to class every day. I'm wasting my time telling them this. So if you're watching this live, you're doing the best. If you are watching this recorded, you're doing good enough. If you're not watching these and you won't hear this, you need help. Okay. Let's put some sizes on these so they look more like boxes and not just lines of text. So we'll just use height. We'll go 200 px and width of 1. Well, let's go height of. Well, let's look at the picture and just judge it. Okay, is this a square? It looks like they're both squares. So I think if we just give it a width, we'll see what that does. If it retains, no, okay, so we'll have to manually specify that to be 200 by 200. All right, now it's looking more like a box, right? Second one is much smaller. So let's go 50 by 50. I'm gonna be fancy here. Control double click. Whoops. Double click this. Control double click this, and then I can type 50px. So if I can remember to do that before I do it the long way, I can save time. All right. That's probably much too small. Let's go 100. Okay. And let's put this here and this here so I can hit this and do that. Okay. Now we got two boxes, one smaller than the other. They got different borders. But there's one more thing different about this picture, and that is divs by default have no margin or padding in Chrome, probably in most browsers. We need a little bit of margin in here, and we need a little bit of margin between these, and a little margin there. So these are both in text that's in divs, so we can just add some actually, I think we need to add, we didn't put these in any sort of structure, so it's just text right in the div, so we can't move it unless we make it an element. So if you want an inline element just for text, you know, you should probably use paragraph, but then it's not going to be kind of property lists. If I put it in a span element, you'll notice it didn't change anything. This is a basically zeroed out property inline element, and so here I can go ahead, I'll just put this around both things. I'll do it the fancy way. So we'll go here and here, and we can do span, and then we can go here and here, and we'll put the closing span tag. Okay. Or I could have typed 1 and copied it, and there's a lot of ways to do it. Okay, so the spans now, we can put span margin of 3 pixels. And that should move everything down a bit. That is way too not enough. Do 5. Okay, what's going on here? Might be because it's inline. Let's give these, let's make these divs instead, because that's a default block element. Actually, let's do it the cool way. Control F2. So this selects every instance of the word span on here, and I know that every instance here, so it's safe for me to do this. I want to change this to div. Okay. Now it'll be 5 pixels from the border. 5 pixels here. We can double check. Load it out here. And let's open the tools here and use the selector to select the div inside of here, and we can see it has a margin of 5 pixels on all sides. 5, 5, 5, 5. Okay. Does that look similar to the picture? This box actually has a little more margin on the left here, right? This is actually, if you design or develop web pages, you will potentially just get a picture from someone and it says, I want it to look like this. Well, it's just a picture. You have to know how to code it to look like that picture. And so this is actually what you would do on the job. There's some space here. I don't have that here. What can I use? Well, this is the second div, div.second. How can we do that? We can just add margin of top is 0, right is 0, bottom is 0, left is 10 pixels. Now we got that little space there. It looks a little more on this one, so we'll just increase that a bit. We'll go 20. Oh, and then I learned this in another class. Maybe I've used this, I don't know. You can hit Control-Enter to quickly reload, because sometimes when I'm zoomed in on the code, it's really annoying to have to scroll up to the top. For those of you who are working a lot with programming, you will, and you're doing it a lot every day or typing every day, you will learn these shortcuts because it'll be important to you to do this efficiently to save time. Anyway, your job may use how many lines of code or features you've completed in a certain amount of time to kind of gauge how good you are. And so, something to consider. Don't lose sleep over it now. Most places just want someone that can do it. They need people that can do it regardless of how fast. But if you can do it faster, then you can beat out your competition. Okay. Which potentially could be the people you're going to school with right now. All right. Don't let that be an excuse not to help people, though. You don't want to burn bridges between professionals in this field. Everybody is a resource. Everybody wants people to, you should want to help people because they might move on to a company, remember you, and say, hey, we got an opening. It's double what you're making now. You want to move, a state away and get double the money. And you say, well, I need to change the scenery. And anyway, it becomes a sitcom, and we don't have time to go over that. Okay. What about the second one? This will be the last thing I do today, because I'm already 4 minutes over, and I'm getting behind on the boring parts of the job. This is the best part. I could do this all day. Anyway, we got 2 boxes. They're stacked on top of each other. I told you, this code is going to be the same. Think about it. How do I get the second box inside of the first one? I don't have to add any code. I just need to change the code I have in here. What change would you make? Think about it. If you remember, I talked about nesting a little while ago. What is that? It's putting elements inside each other. For example, I have this div inside of this div, and we're talking about normal flow. So the computer, when it gets here, it's saying, okay, this opening tag tells it to open a div container. That's the top here. Then, right here, we're opening another div container. Well, that div container is going to be inside the first because it's still open. Then the second one closes. That's the end here. and then the first one closes. That is right here. Okay, so if I want this box to be inside of here, I just need to move the code for the second box. I'll cut it, Control X. I'll just stick it right after this div here. And voila, that box is inside that box now. All right. This is the first step to being able to build more complicated layouts, because what this first box represents is a column that can hold any other element, and we'll be making multiple columns so we can organize our information on the web page to be more easy to read. And then inside of those, we will put other things. For example, we could put other divs that can hold more things, or anything, images in there. We could put an image in here, we could put an image in here. All right, anyway, if there's no more questions or comments, I'm going to go ahead and end it here, and we'll continue on, because we have a, who came up with the schedule? Why there is a gap of, from October 6th to the next assignment being due November 8th, there's quite a big jump in there. Who would do that and why? Well, we're entering in one of the more complicated uses of CSS and HTML, and I don't want to do 4-hour videos all on the same day, so we'll stretch this out a bit. Okay. Anyway, that is it. I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream, and then I'll see you guys next week, unless you need some more help. Oh, I forgot to put in the link here to this demo. And I'll just put both in here. So we'll copy this, and then we'll undo back to 2 boxes. And then I will put the structure with the boxes inside of each other below it, so you can see how that's different. So 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. Copy this link into chat, and then I'll really end the stream here. I'm having a hard time stopping teaching. It's a good problem to have. Okay. Except when you need to grade. All right. Bye. Have a good day. I'll see you next week.